A formal investigation into whether or not President Cyril Ramaphosa's instructions regarding Iran's participation in the exercise Will for Peace 2026 naval drills were ignored or miscommunicated has been launched. The probe will also look to find out if Iran was an active participant or an observer. A report is expected in the coming weeks. Defense analyst Dean Wingrin joins us now for more. Dean, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Typically, how does the instructions of a general or the commander-in-chief get issued, and how does it cascade throughout a armed force?
Good evening. And that's a big question at the moment. Exactly how were these instructions given? Generally, these instructions should be in writing, but it's not unheard of for instructions to be given verbally. And these would then be given to both DIRCO, the Department of International Relations, as well as to the Minister of Defense. And from what we understand, discussions had already been held with both the Iranian diplomats as well as with the other participants in the exercise, namely China and Russia. So from there, the Minister of Defense would then likely instruct the general in charge of joint operations, because it is joint operations that actually undertakes these exercises. The Navy, under the Chief of the Navy, they prepare the vessels and the assets. They then hand them over to joint operations, which actually utilizes these assets. So presumably it would be then between DIRCO and joint operations to interact with the exercise participants, being China as the leader, to request Iran either to downgrade to observer status or whatever other the instruction was. But certainly it appears that the request was that there not be a full participant in this exercise.
Yeah. Now, given the various actors that you've just described and the various roles that they play in the value chain and ecosystem, whose responsibility was it to issue the instruction to Iran on the one hand, which, by the way, we all saw the public statement by the defense minister leading up to this thing, right? So it wasn't ambiguous, at least not to the public, whether or not Iran was going to participate in this. But whose responsibility was it to officially communicate that to them? And how can it be determined whether or not they did so? Was it a military or a Navy responsibility, or was it a diplomatic responsibility? That is to say, DIRCO was meant to do that. But on the other hand, whose responsibility was it to determine whether, roll call, whether the right actors who are meant to participate in this are there and those who are not meant to be there aren't there?
Well, that's the confusing aspect of this, because there are just so many role players in this exercise. And it also shows the miscommunications that is happening between the civilian oversight from the presidency and the president's office and with the military via the Ministry of Defense down through to the Department of Defense. And this communication is, quite frankly, quite embarrassing to South Africa on the international front. It occurs at a very difficult point in time for South Africa, given that one of our major trading partners, being the US, is being very anti-South Africa at the moment, if you want to call it that, in that they have problems with some of our alleged internal policies. They have problems with who we're interacting with. And this is not the first time Iran is actually being a cause of discontent between South Africa and its Western partners, in that in August last year, the chief of the Defense Force, General Makwania, he was in Iran. And it is the Iranian press agencies have attributed a number of comments to the general that treaded on the turf of foreign relations and foreign affairs. And even then, there was a big hoo-ha about that, with the minister denying that the general should have made those statements, the presidency office saying that the general shouldn't have made that statement. The general came home and basically all
Dean,
hands
can
were
I
washed
pause you on
off
that?
and
Because I
nothing
think
further was heard of that.
I want to double click in on that, Dean. Given that instance and the instance we're now dealing with today, is there a general pattern of insubordination in the South African armed forces?
I wouldn't go far as to say insubordination as such, but there's definitely been a trend within the last year or two of certain senior officers within the Defence Force sort of treading out of their defence lane, as it was, and going into the lane of foreign affairs and making pronouncements and doing foreign visits that may not be viewed as in the best interests of South Africa at that particular time. And there's very strict, in terms of our constitution, the Defence Force is very strictly controlled by civilian oversight. The president is the commander-in-chief. There's a number of different parliamentary oversight bodies that have oversight over the military. And we have seen certain officers sort of going and making statements, both locally and overseas, that you wouldn't deem appropriate for a ranking serving officer to make.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it at that. Dean, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Dean Wingrin is a defense analyst.